Okay, hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us on today's webinar. Today we are talking about 7 essential elements to remove friction from your fraud prevention strategy. A few things before we start, some housekeeping items. We are recording the webinar and we'll make sure to mail it out afterwards to all the registrants in the next few days. And we do encourage you to ask questions, and you can do this through the GoToWebinar control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We have reserved some time at the end of the webinar to answer the relevant questions. And you will see a URL at the bottom left of the PowerPoint as we start. Feel free to use this to contact us at any point and to learn more and sign up for a demo if you'd like to do that. Talk to somebody just more to learn about things. So just wanted to point those things out. Okay, and we will go ahead and get started. So I would like to introduce you to our great panel today. First off, we have Josh Johnston, the Director of AI Science here at Kount. Thank you for joining us today, Josh.
Good to be here.
Yes, thank you. Josh has been with Kount for 4 years. He's an AI scientist who exploits information, automates decisions, and focuses attention on relevant data. He has led research teams fighting credit card fraud, deploying self-driving cars, autonomy for bomb disposal robots, and scientific visualization in virtual reality and augmented reality. Josh received a Bachelor's of Science in Electrical Engineering and Mechanical Engineering from Duke University and a Master's of Science in Robotics from Carnegie Mellon University. Thank you, Josh. Next, we have Claude Poucher, the Regional Asset Manager at Party City. Thank you for joining us today, Claude.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Claude has 30 years experience in e-commerce fraud mitigation with Federated Stores, OfficeMax, Office Depot, and most recently Party City, where he is bringing his expertise to us today. And my name is Kathryn Vargas, and I'll be moderating today. I'm the Product Marketing Manager at Kount, where I get to perform research and work across departments within Kount to support the launch of new products and research reports and work with all of the talented folks here at Kount. Okay, let's get started. So today we are going to discuss the essential elements needed to automate fraud prevention using AI and supervised and unsupervised machine learning. Learn why business policies and rules are still important to a fraud prevention strategy. Talk about the benefits of an all-in-one enterprise-grade fraud prevention platform. Hear a lot of great insights from Party City to how they navigated the current e-commerce environment, and end with some Q&A. Okay, so before we get into things, I wanted to set the stage with a background on Party City's business so you kind of know where they're coming from. And I will go ahead and hand it over to Claude at this point to introduce you to his business.
Well, thank you, Kathryn. We have corporate offices in Elmsworth, but also in Rockaway, New Jersey. Have over 850 stores and a large online business. We sell party goods in the U.S., Canada, Mexico. We also service over 40,000 retail outlets where we manufacture balloons, and also costumes and party accessories. And recently, we've obviously expanded our business. We're focusing on just bringing joy to the customers, and it's something that everybody needs at this time in our environment. So excited to be here and excited to be talking to you today.
Great, thank you so much, Claude. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and do a poll of everybody. Let's get some participation from everyone to see where you stand. Our poll today is, what fraud prevention strategies are the most important to you? And you can go ahead and look at the poll on the screen and put in your response. And then I will go ahead and show the results of it after the fact when people are finished voting. Okay, so The most important fraud prevention strategy is reduce chargebacks at 62%, followed by minimal false declines or false positives at 56%, lowering friction 36%, minimal or zero manual reviews at 31%. Excellent. Thank you all so much for answering. That helps give a baseline for today. Okay, so we wouldn't be able to talk about fraud prevention strategies without touching on the current COVID situation, as you all know. And we thought that Party City's situation was really interesting and probably similar to what a lot of you have seen in the past few months. This graph shows Party City's monthly e-commerce transactions. You can see the drastic jump in transactions, which is showing a 277% increase in volume due to their e-commerce increased rates. So I'd like to hand it over to Claude to talk more about what they saw and go into a little bit more about how their business has changed in the past few months.
Thank you. So, you know, as we expanded and started reopening stores, one thing that we knew right away is that we had to have some contactless payment options for customers. And so we rolled out curbside pickup. We also rolled out buy online, ship from the store, and also delivery out of the store to suit our customer needs. And so in doing that, each of those presented unique opportunities for us. The initial influx of business was obviously fantastic and well needed after being shut down for over 30 days. And I'm sure what everyone has seen is the business fluctuates by the region and based on whether or not those stores opened up earlier or markets opened up earlier. And so that's what we've been dealing with. You know, April started out building up. May was just very strong. And then the business started to level off a little bit as we had our stores opening up.
Excellent, very interesting. Okay, Josh, do you want to provide any commentary from Count's end?
Well, I'll just say I think this is certainly a pattern that we've seen all over our customer base is huge increases in e-commerce. I think people that have been in e-commerce entirely have been seeing these increases. We've seen particularly for folks like Party City that have both a brick and mortar and an e-commerce footprint. Generally, for those businesses, the e-commerce business has been a smaller piece of the total. And so when traffic has moved from the store to online or to these hybrid models, like Claude was talking about, buy online, pick up in store, ship from store, which are oftentimes processed as an e-commerce transaction versus a card present transaction. We can see these tremendous increases in volume, which can obviously put a lot of stress on a business. I think the most important thing to think about here is that directionally, business is going to e-commerce, or at least e-commerce is becoming a more significant part of the portfolio for most businesses. So if we think about it that way, what COVID-19 has done is really accelerated that trend. This is not a new trend, it's just an acceleration. And that makes things like customer friction and not having false positives all the more important, because these are the new customers that you might have been seeing over the next 6 to 12 months that are going to go give the e-commerce site a try. Now they've been pushed into giving it a try now. And whether they are sticky and remain as e-commerce customers because they like the experience, or whether they go on somewhere else, is going to depend on the customer experience that they receive right now.
Excellent, very interesting. Okay, so now with that kind of background, we're going to go ahead and jump into outlining the 7 essential elements to remove friction from your fraud prevention strategy. And we are going to go ahead and start off with talking about the automated elements such as AI and machine learning, and then go ahead and jump after that into the elements that you can control for your own business situation, including policies and rules, analytics, and even managed services to help you with your business, to remove friction and also, do all those things like reduce chargebacks, reduce manual reviews, and all that. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Josh now, our expert in AI and machine learning, to talk about those first four.
Sure. So when we're talking about artificial intelligence is just when a machine exercises something that looks like human judgment. So in this context, we're talking about automated decision making. There is a transaction that we are evaluating to determine whether or not it's fraud. And we're trying to make that decision very quickly with a very large amount of data, more so than would be available to a person doing a manual review. But the key here is this is still a hard problem. So that's why we consider it an artificial intelligence problem, is that when a computer can make this type of complex decision correctly, that looks to us like something that we would normally expect from human judgment. So the way we do this has to start with data. There's all sorts of data that's available at the time of an e-commerce transaction. From payments data, what is the type of payments? Is it a card? Is it a loyalty or gift card program? Is it a credit card, debit card, wallets like Apple Pay, PayPal, etc.? The information about what is actually being purchased and how much money is being spent, what kind of currency, what type of shipping is being used. Lots of information there, just solely tied to the payment, which is particularly important since the payment is really what makes it fraud. Fundamentally, when we're talking about e-commerce fraud, it means somebody is using a payment method that they do not actually control. It's someone else's payment method. The way we used to solve this back in the early days of credit cards in general was through the use of a secret. So the credit card number was a secret that was only known to the bank and to the holder of that credit card. I think, as we all know these days, credit card numbers aren't secrets. We give them out to people all the time, and they're for sale out there on the dark web. So these days, if you want to understand whether a person is who they say they are or not, you've got to go beyond this one shared secret, and you've got to understand their buying patterns, and you have to understand aspects of their behavior that are difficult to change or replicate. So things like the location ID, digital information, the device that they're using, the places that they've been, having access to more parts of the identity like home number and physical address, shipping address. Oftentimes, even if you know the cardholder's shipping address, you obviously don't want to ship the good to them. You want to ship it somewhere else where you can intercept it. And then lots of information that a business is going to have about their relationship with that customer. So things like loyalty numbers, coupon codes, also information that we can take like in the hospitality industry. Things that tend to be important are when you are purchasing something, if it's last minute or if it's purchased sometime out. So all of this kind of data, some of it is, I think, pretty obvious to see where it comes from. Other parts require a device information collector code that runs as part of the browser page or mobile app to collect this information. But that's where we're going to start. That's what we're going to feed into the into our algorithms. So I mentioned artificial intelligence is kind of the whole package. It's the taking this data and coming to a decision. So how you want to do that, there are two big categories which I'm going to cover in the next couple of slides. One of them is called unsupervised and one of them is supervised. And this doesn't have to do with whether somebody's watching or not. Both of these are automated processes. This is a term of art in the machine learning space that refers to what we call a supervisory signal. And that means, is there some kind of historical ground truth data? So a supervised approach in the fraud domain, we would take a bunch of transactions that happened in the past and we know whether they were fraud or not. And we train the algorithm to be able, with that information, to predict a future transaction, determine whether it's fraud or not. And that signal, that supervisory signal, were these chargebacks, were these declined by the bank, refunded, et cetera, all the ways that a transaction can go bad. That data is the supervisory signal, and that's what's used in those techniques. The limitations of a supervisory approach are that we have to have good quality data, which is oftentimes hard to arrive at. So there are other reasons that there can be chargebacks and refunds. Friendly fraud is one important way that we can have chargebacks that are not necessarily third-party identity theft. Refunds, obviously, there's lots of different things that drive refunds, which may or may not be bad customer behavior, but they also may or may not be third-party fraud. If I call because I see a charge that doesn't make sense on my credit card statement, I will call the merchant and they may refund it to avoid a chargeback, even though that really was theft of the identity. As well as there's generally difficulty with payment service providers to be able to get all chargebacks reported, given the fact that they can come from many different avenues and many different banks. So supervisory signals are great, but they're very after the fact. We have to wait until things have turned bad and there's chargebacks occurring. The challenge with that is that once somebody knows their credit card's been stolen, it's already been canceled and it can't do any more damage. So we have to find the fraud before it's known to even the cardholder. And for that, we use these techniques that are unsupervised machine learning techniques. And in the fraud domain, the way to do this is generally through linking between transactions. And here, we're not looking for outcomes, we're looking for structure in the data. And on the next slide here, I'll give an example of what I mean. And the outcome of all of that is to create one score or number that says essentially what the machine thinks about this transaction. Does it look like it's fraud or not? So this is a network of information, a knowledge graph that shows a variety of transactions. Those are the shopping carts, and their relationships with some different pieces of identity. So every time you see a phone or a device or a credit card or a house or a person, those are things like phone numbers, device, durable device identifier that's been detected through a device fingerprint, names, physical addresses, payment tokens. This identity on the left, this is like a normal identity. You can see that when somebody buys something, they use several of these same elements of identity, and they tend to reuse those. Now, over here on the right, you can see these transactions that are in purple. That's because these were chargebacks. And here we can see that these transactions shared none of the same identity elements except for the credit card. And they actually used a new email address that it didn't appear anywhere else. This is a simple example. They're not by any means always this obvious. But this is a way to see that a from the structure of this problem, we can see what good normal behavior looks like. This is a good identity on the left side, somebody who is, who is paying with their own method of payment. And then you can see when their credit card's been stolen and is being used by someone else. Even if we don't have any outcome data here, we can understand what's going on just from the structure of this problem. And the last point I want to make about this is that this is also why a network is so important, because these transactions that we're looking at are from several different merchants. So it's important that your fraud solution have a very large customer base, because you want to see these patterns developing before they've come and hit you. These 5 chargebacks here are actually the first transactions that particular merchant saw from this customer. So, from that perspective alone, without the information from this real-time identity network, you wouldn't know that anything was up unless you had already been able to build this other view of what's out there. So again, this is an unsupervised technique when we're looking for structure in the data rather than the outcomes. I'm moving to the supervised approaches. This is that same set of transactions, except now we've actually expanded out and said, what do we know about this email address that was the new email address that was showing up in those transactions? And here, the color coding is things like refunds, bank declines, declines by the fraud prevention tool, and the purple ones are, again, chargebacks. So we can see that there's a variety of bad transactions that have been associated with this email address. And again, this is a very simple example. In reality, we use thousands of data points for these types of calculations. But you can see here how it would also be very helpful if you know that this email address has been up to no good in the past, then you would not want to do business with it moving forward. And that is that's a supervisory approach. So at Kount, we use both of these techniques, the supervised and unsupervised approaches. Again, there's a lot more complexity to how all of these come together. And in particular, a lot of the machine learning challenges are how we deal with the interdependency between these variables. What if the email address looks risky, but the physical address looks safe? Again, not just through 2 variables, but through hundreds or thousands of variables. So connecting all of these variables together and understanding the dependence between them, that's kind of where that's where the machine learning gets really complicated. We take all of that together and come to one score. At Kount, we call this our Omni score because it uses all of these different machine learning techniques. And we use an old school letter grade. I know the schools are increasingly moving to other grades that we parents find confusing. But here you can see something that scored a 42.7, which at least back in my day meant a failing grade. It's also very important when we have these techniques that we're not just providing an answer. An answer is great. If you can't provide an answer, then it's not AI, because you would expect an answer from a real person. But also, we need to provide the data about how we got there, because you do want to be able to go back either in the course of manual reviews or in the course of evaluating the policies that have been put in place. And you'll want to know, well, why is this a 42.7? And that's why all of this other information that's here, some of the data that you can see on the first slide, both the raw data as well as how it's been interpreted and expanded by doing things like using the BIN number, the first 6 digits of a credit card number. From there, we can determine the bank's location, what country it's in, et cetera, as well as, of course, things like what kind of risk we see from that particular bank. That type of information's also packaged here with the Omni score. And again, there's a lot of detail and depth to this machine learning techniques, which I could talk all day about. But in the interest of hearing from Claude, I'll just say that down in the bottom here, where it's Kount.com/7elements, if you follow that link, we can hook you up with our team and answer any more questions that you have about how this machine learning works.
Thank you so much, Josh. It's so interesting to hear about that. It really never gets old. I love hearing about what's going on in the product and with AI and machine learning. But the next part of this that's also going to be extremely interesting is to hear how Party City has put this into practice. So moving on now to the next phase of the 7 essential elements, we're going to talk about the elements that you all can control with your business and the things that you'll want to change depending on what your own strategies are. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Claude.
Thank you, Kathryn. So when you look at the whole process, for me, coming on board with the company 3 years ago, Kount had been implemented, but there had been no rules put in place, and there really wasn't. From our standpoint, we had dropped the ball. We had some turnover in leadership, and so coming on board, the first thing I had to do is really understand what were our losses. So it's just extremely important to start getting good reporting, and Kount was very helpful in pulling together information. Obviously, we still had internal business partners that we had to get information on regarding chargeback losses. We used a third party for chargeback, so we had to get that information. We had to get partner with our customer service team, find out what pain points they currently were having, and then with our IT departments and find out where they were in the whole process as far as linking to Kount, and the linkage really wasn't a problem. We had more internal issues with our IT department than we really did with Kount. The Kount integration was relatively painless. So having the rule, setting up some good reporting, setting up some monthly meetings with Kount, excuse me, and also setting them up with the customer service team, IT, and making sure that the fraud prevention plan is integrated with the whole team. So especially as we went into this year, we realized that we didn't have the capacity to handle the manual reviews and handle the rules on our own, and we needed a partner. We needed more help from Kount. Kount was quick to help us with that process. So initially we started out where we were building our rules, looking at our business, which is a little bit unique because there's times that we do allow freight forwarders and third-party reshippers where some companies wouldn't be able to do that based on the type of product mix that they have. And so you have to build your fraud platform off of your whole business and how it's designed. So we looked at that first. We realized that we needed to build some minimal rules and try not to the Omni score is very effective, but you also have to have some internal rules built on your risk factors and what you're willing to, how big the risk is for you. I mean, my past life, I worked for Office Depot and Office Max for selling laptops and higher end product. Our model's a little bit different. Our average sale is lower. And so you have to build your rules around those pieces of the business and understand them. and so the first thing is reporting. You have to have reporting. You have to know what your chargeback rate as a percent of your sales are. You have to know what percentage of those chargebacks are in-house in the retail environment versus e-commerce. So you have to structure and get the information that you need from your business partners in order to build your platform and build your rules. And then you have to have real-time reporting. And one thing that Kount has always been good with me is we built out some good weekly reports where we looked at the manual reviews that were being done and what percentage they were and how many of the manual reviews were being done. We developed a more robust plan going into this year where Kount not only was just doing some minimal manual reviews during our Halloween season, which is our peak, but we realized very quickly that we were going to need a lot more help as the business was ramping up and as we were adding all these different ways, multi-channel, that the customers could make purchases for us. And we wanted to do it as, frictionless as possible. So we started developing rules by those different types of purchases. For example, a delivery purchase versus a pickup on the curb. And then what kind of procedures are we going to put in place, whether it's validation from ID or if we're just going to just have some operational performance set up where a manager has to approve what's going out, or we're auditing the shipments in the morning to validate that the orders have been picked properly. So, there's a lot of processes and procedures in place when you're dealing with omni-channel that you want to consider. For example, in a buy online, pick up in store scenario, if the order was placed in San Francisco and being picked up in Miami, there's risk associated with that distance. You want to build rules that have distance in there in addition to other outliers to look for to go into manual review. And then for us, we don't really believe we'll ever get away from a full manual review process. We want to minimize the manual reviews because we know that is going to speed up the transactions. And so one thing that we look at when we had business, a buy online, pick up in store has a 2-hour SLA. If we're delivering out of the store, it's a 2-hour SLA. So we wanted to make sure that we automated rules regarding those types of transactions. So they would auto approve, auto decline when the Kount manual review team was not available for us to work. And so we build the rules around those. We also realized that there were times when we weren't updating the white list or the list of chargebacks, and we weren't purging those lists. So we were keeping way too much data, and that was causing some increased manual review. So we purged the white list after 18 months, and that's kind of our cycle now to look at it. Kount was very helpful in that. We also took our chargebacks, and twice a month we upload those chargebacks into Kount and use that as part of the machine learning and OmniScore for those transactions. So let me see where we're at here. So we got to the point really at that point where we realized that the business was booming. We didn't have the manpower to do manual reviews. So we went to a managed service agreement with Kount. We added Ethica alerts. We added White Pages Pro that's called Encarta now. And so in doing that, that just gave us the ability to flex the business and accommodate everything that we need to do to be successful. I did want to do just a little quick shout out. Wendy Lette and Tyler, who are two of our Kount contacts and help us with the managed services, just do an outstanding job. They've been very responsive to us and have helped us all along the way to building out the fraud program. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Kathryn.
Thank you so much. So let's go ahead and look at some of the results that you guys have seen in the past couple months, and I'll let Claude and Josh talk about what you've seen and what this graph means, and maybe some of the things that you guys did to get to the numbers and the results that you did.
Yeah, so a couple of things. You know, if you look at this by merging the chargeback data into Kount, and also making rule modifications on a monthly basis and updating the rules, so the fraudsters get smart and they start to figure out where your thresholds are. So you have to stay ahead of all those. And as you can see, two things we were trying to do. We wanted to reduce our chargebacks, but as we got into this, into April and May, we started saying, you know what, we got to really go after making sure that the customer friction is reduced. Our chargebacks were in line, they look great, but we want to make sure that we reduce the customer friction, and that's when we updated the whitelist. We started looking at rules that we had put into place. We thought they were good rules, but when we actually looked at some of the data, they either weren't firing at all, or they were firing too often and too many orders were going into manual review. So we looked at those, we updated them, and we eliminated those. And you can see the transaction count went down, the rules went down, and then if you want to go to well, I'll let Josh comment on that, and then we can look at the next slide.
Yeah, I always love hearing the user perspective on the complexities of managing fraud. I think that what COVID-19 is showing us here is how important some of these metrics that are, I mean, they're kind of hard to measure. They're more qualitative. We focus on things like this review rate, and obviously we love to see review rates dropping. But I think that the points that Claude made about how it's not just one review rate, it's the idea that some transactions you can review, and other transactions, if there's an SLA because the customer is coming to the store to pick it up, then there are times where you don't have the luxury of doing a review, or if it's after hours, or something like that. So that's why we see these 7 essential elements. The idea that machine learning is never going to be able to understand the intricacies of your business and your business needs, especially as they change. Again, hearing the idea that Party City needs something different out of their e-commerce business in April and May than they did in January and February, because of external factors that are never going to be visible in the data stream, here in e-commerce. So this is why it's important that there's transparency and visibility into where these scores and decisions are coming from, and that at the end of the day, the policies are set by people, even when those people don't have to go in and do manual reviews, and the decisions are being made by the machine. The policies that guide those decisions are being set by people. I think one other thing that stands out to me about a chart like this, this looks a lot like a holiday chart for many customers. If you move May to November or December, and one thing that I think everybody out there needs to be aware of is that businesses tend to think about chargebacks as a fraction of volume, but chargebacks lag by up to 3 months behind when the transactions occur. So I think that many folks right now who've been seeing increasing e-commerce through April, May, and June are probably looking at a chargeback rate that's dropped tremendously. And that's because the chargebacks that were being reported in May were coming from February, March, and April when the transaction volume was lower. And you need to be prepared for the flip side of that, which is that all of the chargebacks from May and June are going to be showing up in what may be kind of more of a return to normal, or at least return back towards normal, which means that you may see an artificial jump in the chargeback rate. And that makes the ability to look at reports and to really understand the data and where things are coming from that much more important, so that you can tell the difference between a change in chargeback rate that's actually being driven by changes in fraud or unsuccessful or successful policies, and be able to separate that from a change in chargeback rate that's actually just driven by a change in volume.
Yeah, that's a great point. So if we look at the next slide, obviously you can see where the chargeback rate has gone down, and that is exciting. We do absolutely do realize it's going to go back up, and it will go up at some point. There's going to be that spike, or a little bit of a spike. Let's hope it's not too bad. But we feel very comfortable that with the plan that we have in place and the partnership that we have with Kount and with our chargeback operations, that we have this under control, and we'll have some good results.
All right, so I'm going to just hit here on a summary. This slide shows at a high level the way that the Kount fraud solution works. So up front, that's on the left side here, there's an interaction. And we've been focused heavily during this conversation on payment transactions, but there are other interactions that our system can ingest. Things like account creations, account changes, card adds, verifications, and logins. That interaction occurs up front, and there is a risk request saying, "Hey, what's going on with this event or transaction?" And that goes into our artificial intelligence, which uses, again, supervised and unsupervised machine learning, two different approaches to solving this problem. Both of those approaches are about putting data into the context of our Identity Trust Global Network, which is spanning across all of our customers. So it is not just looking at this transaction in particular, but looking at all the patterns, all of the customer history, all of the ways that we can put this transaction into context of what else has been going on. And that drives our OmniScore, which then goes into our business policy engine. And that's where the policy decisions, the ways that decisions should be made, I should say, all of those are implemented, and that gets us to a decision, which is then visible in our Data Mart business intelligence tool for reporting, dashboarding, etc. That decision feeds back into our artificial intelligence and machine learning to improve it, and it also obviously goes back to our clients who can take action on it. And all of this process occurs, as you can see, that 250 milliseconds in under 250 milliseconds, which is a lot to jam into about the time that it takes to blink.
Excellent. Thank you, Josh, for the summary. Okay, everybody, so that concludes the really neat of the presentation today. And we did have a lot of questions come through, but before we get to those, we did want to mention that we're running a promotion right now where you can get a demo and give back. If you sign up and complete a demo of Kount Fraud Protection Solution, we will donate $100 to your favorite charity. And we make it easy to sign up. Here's the polling question. If you're interested in getting a demo, you can select yes, and we will contact you from there. And we did want to make a note that this offer is also available for current clients to take advantage of because we know we do have a lot of new products. And so while you all are doing the survey, wanted to go ahead and say that run through the products that we have. We've got Kount Command, which is e-commerce payments fraud protection, Kount Control, which is out account takeover fraud protection, Kount's Friendly Fraud Prevention, which is the MPI service and helps with friendly fraud. We've got our professional services, of which managed services is an option, and Kount Data on Demand, which is private data warehousing for reporting and analytics. Okay, so with that, we will go ahead and move on to the Q&A portion of the webinar. And we did get some questions, so I will start out. Okay, so first one, did the folks from Kount indicate how well their model adjusts to a business that is fully electronic purchases and goods delivery/fulfillment? Would you say that your champion indicators with Party City would still be champions in a business where there's no physical delivery or pickup?
Yeah, so we have been focused in this discussion on a business, Party City, that has a hybrid brick and mortar and e-commerce business, and also, especially I think recently in the COVID-19, has driven to hybrid delivery methods that involve both the store and e-commerce aspects. Many, if not most, of our customers operate actually entirely in an e-commerce context without the physical brick and mortar stores. And also, many of our customers deliver things entirely digitally. So digital delivery of goods, and that's things like subscriptions for access, streaming services, ebooks, various deliveries of fully digital items, as well as we have a lot of businesses that have ticketing or services. If you think about things like travel or short-term rental, we have a lot of customers in those spaces. So our account managers are happy to be able to go and find the relevant case studies for whatever business use case that you represent. But our machine learning, to answer that question specifically about the machine learning technology behind it, yes, we are very aware of these various different vectors, and our machine learning is designed to handle all of those, both out of the box and then also at retraining after a new customer has signed on and sent some data for us to be able to make improvements based on their specific patterns. Again, using that supervised machine learning side of things.
Excellent. Thank you, Josh. Okay, for the second question, for email addresses, do you offer services that will look at important characteristics such as how long that email has been active or different rules for different email types?
Yeah, so we pull a bunch of different characteristics out of the email, including the email type, like the domain. We oftentimes see entire domains that are dedicated to fraud. Commonly, fraudsters will create a fake business with a storefront. You can go to the website, it all looks like it exists, but actually they're just engaged in fraud. There's also significant differences in trends between email addresses that are free to sign up for, like Gmail and Yahoo, versus email addresses that you have to have some kind of a subscription or payment for. If you think about like an Apple ID or a Comcast email address. It's important to realize that once we get into this machine learning space, we're not just talking about good and bad, we're talking about patterns and how these things interact. So I can say that an email address from a free service has about twice the risk associated with it as an email address from a paid service. But that in itself is not enough to make a decision because the risk from both of those is actually pretty low. So what's more important than just a direct risk is, as I was saying earlier, the interaction and dependency between these, between these emails. More significant than that difference in risk directly is the fact that people with these different types of email addresses will behave differently. And what looks risky for one type of email address may not be risky for another type of email address. And in addition to the domain, which I specifically called out, we actually pull a few dozen characteristics and data points from the email addresses that deal with things like the number of vowels that are in the email address. So a kind of a common natural language processing technique to determine whether something's gibberish or it's a or it's a real world. Those are features that we incorporate, and then in our machine learning. And then several of those features, including the date the email was first seen in our system, are exposed directly in the policy engine. So you can make a rule based on when the billing and shipping addresses were first seen, which is oftentimes a good way to identify emails that have been generated by a script. Those go into the machine learning. They're also in our policy engine as well as in the reporting tools.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Next question. What's the best strategy for me to implement today to see quick results?
So I'm real interested in what Claude has to say from his experience, having I think gotten a handle on fraud in a couple of different organizations. I can say the way that we start with Kount is we start by basing off of our machine learning score. That's the place that we begin, and we find that provides very good results for most of our customers. And our onboarding team will talk with an onboarding client to understand their specific use cases and their specific concerns and business goals, what they're willing to tolerate. And then from there, we go and we start adding those business policies. Claude mentioned that his business is okay shipping to reshippers in certain contexts. Not all businesses are, so that's something that we put in place in addition to the machine learning, is oftentimes those kinds of policies, and that's a pretty good start. And then from there, once the data starts flowing in, the machine learning gets smarter, as well as we make refinements to those rules and policies and suggest rules that either should be added, changed, or removed based on what we see in the data.
Yeah, that's a pretty tough question to answer right off the bat, but I think Josh did a good job with it. But for me, the first step for me would just be to understand the scope of the problem, to look at some historical data for the company, and then see what tools you have available that you can levers that you can pull for whatever the exposure is. I mean, sometimes the exposure could be certain items that your particular business has the most exposure to. Well, you need to build rules around those items. Other times it could be a certain way that you're doing the delivery, or it could be a certain part of the country where you're incurring the most loss. So you just need to be, to kind of understand the numbers first, and then try to build your fraud around that.
Okay, thank you both. We are nearing the top of the hour, so I'm going to start wrapping it up right now. If your question didn't get answered, we would be happy for you to talk with us. Go ahead and go to that URL on the left and schedule some time, and you can go ahead and do that. And we really appreciate